He was the billionaire everyone feared, arrogant, rude, and known for humiliating staff in public. No one ever dared to stand up to him, until one ordinary waitress did the unthinkable. What happened next shocked the entire restaurant. From the moment he entered a room, silence followed. His name was Mr. Leonard Hale, one of the richest men in the city. He owned companies, hotels, and even a private jet that people whispered about. But he wasn't famous for his wealth alone. He was infamous for his terrible attitude. People didn't admire him. They feared him. His wealth opened every door, but his personality shut hearts in an instant. Wherever he went, the air grew heavy, like a storm had just arrived. Leonard was rude, arrogant, and treated everyone as if they were beneath him. Waiters feared serving him because they knew he would complain, no matter how perfect the service was. Managers pretended to be busy whenever he arrived, hoping they wouldn't be called to his table. Even the finest restaurants, chefs held their breath when they heard he had made a reservation. They knew Leonard didn't come to enjoy food. He came to criticize, to prove his power, and to make others feel small. Customers often whispered, "There goes the man who insults staff for fun." They weren't wrong. Leonard seemed to find entertainment in belittling others. He mocked a waiter's accent once, laughed at a hostess for mispronouncing a wine label, and even threw a napkin at a busboy because it wasn't folded the way he liked. The stories spread quickly, and though people hated his behavior, no one dared to confront him. After all, he was a billionaire. He had influence, lawyers, and power that could ruin careers in an instant. And Leonard knew this. He wore his arrogance like a crown, daring anyone to challenge him. For years, people simply avoided his table or bent over backward to please him. They thought it was safer to stay quiet, to bow their heads, and to get through the evening without an incident. But fate has a way of putting the right person in the right place. On one particular evening, when the Golden Leaf restaurant was glowing with soft lights and filled with the scent of roasted garlic and fresh bread, a new waitress walked in to start her shift. Her name was Amara. She didn't yet know the reputation of this powerful, impossible man. She didn't know the warnings that others lived by. All she knew was that she had been hired to do her job with honesty and dignity. No one dared to challenge Leonard Hale. No one, until the day Amara stepped in, unaware that her courage was about to change everything. Amara was new to the city. She had just started her job at the luxurious Golden Leaf restaurant, a place where wealthy businessmen, celebrities, and politicians often came to dine. The chandeliers sparkled like diamonds, the tables were decorated with fresh flowers, and the air always smelled of rich spices and fine wine. For Amara, it was an entirely different world from the small town she had come from. She was young, hardworking, and proud of her job. To her, being a waitress was not something to look down on. It was an opportunity to learn, to earn, and to build a life she had always dreamed of. And though the job was demanding, Amara carried herself with dignity and respect, something her parents had instilled in her since childhood. On her very first week, her coworkers were quick to share the one piece of advice they thought mattered most. Be careful. If Mr. Hale shows up, don't speak unless spoken to. Do exactly what he says. They spoke in hushed tones, as though saying his name too loudly might summon him. Some of the staff even shuddered at the thought. They told her stories of how he had once reduced a waiter to tears, how he had demanded a manager fire a busboy just because his water wasn't served with ice, and how he once sent a meal back 3 times, not because it was bad, but because he enjoyed watching people scramble under pressure. Amara listened to their warnings, nodded politely, and thanked them. But inside, she felt different. Respect, she believed, should always go both ways. Money might buy comfort, but it should never buy cruelty. She didn't say this out loud, of course. She was new, and she didn't want to sound arrogant. But deep in her heart, she had decided that no matter who sat at her table, she would treat them with the same calm and fairness she expected in return. That Friday evening, the restaurant was busier than usual. The golden lights reflected on the polished floors. Waiters moved swiftly from table to table, and a murmur of laughter and conversation filled the air. Suddenly, the heavy doors opened, and the mood shifted in an instant. In walked Leonard Hale. His tailored suit looked like it cost more than most people earned in a year. His cold stare swept across the room like a knife, and the sound of his two bodyguards' footsteps echoed ominously behind him. It was as if a shadow had entered the bright, cheerful restaurant. Customers froze mid-bite. Conversations dropped to whispers. Some diners leaned in to watch, fascinated by the presence of such a powerful man, while others lowered their eyes to avoid his gaze. The staff reacted even more sharply. Waiters quickly busied themselves with trays, pretending not to notice him. The hostess forced a nervous smile, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared to greet him. Even the manager adjusted his tie nervously, already preparing for whatever storm was about to unfold. But fate had its own plan that evening. When the seating arrangements were finalized, Amara, new, innocent, and still unaware of just how feared Leonard Hale was, found herself assigned to his table. Some of her coworkers gasped when they saw her name on the schedule next to his. A senior waiter even tried to offer switch with her, whispering, "You don't know what you're in for." But Amara simply smiled, adjusted her apron, and said quietly, "It's just another table." Unfortunately, or maybe, just maybe, fortunately, this was no ordinary table. This was the moment where her path and Leonard Hale's collided, setting in motion a night neither of them would ever forget. Leonard glanced at her name tag with disinterest, his expression as cold as the ice in his untouched glass of water. "Bring me my usual, quickly, and don't make a mistake." His tone was sharp, dismissive, dripping with the arrogance that had made so many others tremble in fear. Amara didn't flinch. She nodded calmly, her voice steady. "Certainly, sir. May I confirm your usual order, so I don't get it wrong?" The question caught him off guard. His eyes narrowed, as if she had spoken in a foreign language. No one had ever dared to ask him that. Most waiters scrambled away, memorizing his order in terror, praying not to upset him. Leonard tilted his head and studied her for a moment. "Are you new here?" "Yes," she replied with a professional smile that didn't falter under his piercing stare. "And I'd like to get your order right." For a second, it seemed he might soften, but then his pride returned like a shield. Instead of answering her, Leonard snapped his fingers impatiently. "Just do your job. Don't waste my time." Amara walked away without showing a hint of annoyance, but when she returned with his meal, Leonard's games began. He took one sip of the water, spat it back into the glass, and growled, "This isn't cold enough. Do you people not know how to use ice?" Minutes later, he poked at the steak with his fork and sneered, "Too salty. Amateur cooking." Then he broke off a piece of bread, tossed it back on the plate, and muttered loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "This bread is warm. Disgusting. Do you serve leftovers here?" Each complaint was louder than the last, designed not just to embarrass Amara, but to entertain himself. His voice carried across the restaurant, and the once lively chatter of other diners dwindled into nervous silence. Staff members stole glances from behind the counter, some shaking their heads sadly, others silently praying Amara wouldn't be crushed by his cruelty. Leonard leaned back in his chair and snapped his fingers again, this time as if summoning a servant rather than calling a waitress. Amara approached, still composed, though the humiliation he tried to throw at her was heavy enough to break anyone else. He smirked, raised his voice, and finally bellowed, "This is pathetic service. Don't you know who I am?" The words cut through the air like a whip. The entire restaurant froze. A spoon clattered from someone's hand. The hostess stopped mid-step, and even the background music seemed quieter. Everyone waited for the usual ending, an apology, a nervous breakdown, maybe even tears. That was how every encounter with Leonard Hale ended. But this time was different. Amara stood tall, her hands folded neatly in front of her, her voice calm but firm. She looked him directly in the eyes, unshaken by his wealth or his reputation, and said, "Sir, I do know who you are, but your wealth doesn't give you the right to disrespect people. I'm here to serve you food, not to be insulted." Gasps rippled across the room. Forks paused midair. Someone near the back whispered, "Did she just—" No one had ever dared speak to Leonard Hale that way. For the first time in years, The billionaire who silenced rooms with his presence found himself silenced by the courage of one waitress. Leonard's face turned red with shock and anger, his jaw tightening as though he were about to unleash a storm of fury. His reputation had been built on moments like this, on breaking people down until they apologized, begged, or walked away in tears. His bodyguards shifted uneasily behind him, eyes darting between their employer and the fearless young waitress who dared to challenge him. It was clear they were waiting for the order to remove her, or worse, to demand she be fired on the spot. But Amara didn't flinch. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't crack. Instead, she stood as firmly as a soldier on a battlefield, her calmness filling the tense silence. Her words came out steady, each one carrying a quiet strength that cut deeper than any shout could. You can shout at me if you want. You can call me names. But it won't change who I am, a human being worthy of respect. The entire restaurant held its breath. A fork slipped from a diner's hand, clattering onto the floor, but no one moved to pick it up. Every eye was fixed on the billionaire and the waitress. Even the music that played softly in the background seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of Leonard's heavy breathing. The manager, pale and sweating, rushed forward nervously. He already imagined the worst. The billionaire demanding Amara's job, lawsuits, or even a scandal that could shut the restaurant down. He opened his mouth to apologize on her behalf, but before he could say a word, Leonard lifted his hand sharply, silencing him. For the first time in years, Leonard Hale had no clever insult ready, no mocking remark. He just stared at Amara, as if he were seeing something unfamiliar, something he didn't know how to fight. Her courage, her refusal to bow to his power, struck him harder than any words he had heard before. Then, slowly, something completely unexpected happened. Leonard's lips curved, and he laughed. But it wasn't his usual cold, sarcastic laugh that carried arrogance. It was genuine, raw, almost surprised. People blinked in disbelief. The sound was so unfamiliar that even his bodyguards exchanged confused looks. "You've got guts," Leonard finally said, smirking in a way that carried more respect than mockery. "Nobody ever talks back to me." Amara didn't smile or retreat. She simply replied, her voice calm and steady. "Maybe they should." The billionaire leaned back in his chair, still staring at her with an expression that was half amusement, half admiration. He didn't snap his fingers again. He didn't send back the food or humiliate her further. For once, he quietly picked up his fork, cut into his meal, and ate without another complaint. Around the room, whispers began to rise, customers glancing at one another in astonishment. Many of them had dined there before. Many had seen Leonard Hale at his worst. But tonight, for the first time, they witnessed something different, a powerful man silenced, not by fear or force, but by the quiet strength of a young woman who refused to be disrespected. The next morning, news of the incident spread like wildfire. A few customers had secretly recorded the exact moment Amara stood her ground, her calm voice echoing against Leonard's arrogance. By sunrise, the video was everywhere, on social media platforms, in news headlines, even on television talk shows. Millions of people watched as the world's rudest billionaire was silenced by a young waitress who refused to bow down to him. The internet exploded with support for Amara. Hashtags with her name began trending. People called her the fearless waitress, the voice of the working class, and even the woman who tamed the untouchable billionaire. Strangers from different countries left comments praising her courage, saying they wished they had her strength when facing unfair bosses or rude customers. For many, she became a symbol of dignity and self-respect. As for Leonard Hale, something began to shift inside him. For years, he had lived in a bubble where money controlled everything and people around him trembled at his presence. But when Amara's words went viral, he was forced to see himself through the eyes of the world, and what he saw wasn't flattering. He saw a man who had let his wealth destroy his humanity. He saw a bully, not a leader. 1 week later, Leonard returned to the Golden Leaf restaurant. The staff braced themselves for another storm, but to their shock, he walked in quietly, without his usual scowl. This time, he requested to be seated in Amara's section. When she approached his table, expecting the same arrogance, he surprised her with two simple words, "Please, thank you." It was a small change, but a powerful one. His staff noticed. His business partners noticed. Even people outside his circle began whispering about the new Leonard Hale. The man who once mocked and belittled others was now learning the basics of kindness, something he had forgotten long ago. Rumors spread quickly. Some said Amara's courage had humbled the billionaire in a way no lawsuit, no business deal, and no loss of money ever could. Others believed he had been waiting for someone strong enough to stand up to him. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. Leonard Hale was no longer the same man he had been before that night. Amara, on the other hand, didn't see herself as a hero. To her, she had simply done what was right. When reporters asked her how she found the strength to face him, she answered with humility, "I just treated him the way I'd want to be treated, with honesty and respect." Sometimes, that's all it takes to remind someone of their humanity. And so, the rude billionaire everyone avoided finally learned a lesson he would never forget. Thanks to the new black waitress who stood her ground and showed the world that courage and respect are more powerful than money and fear. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful video. Thanks for watching.